And to make a long story short, what they found is that the group told the tests were from California solved about 40% more of the inside puzzles, and the group told the tests were from Indiana University. They were better able to thinking outside the box, thinking creatively about these very difficult puzzles. And what the scientists argue is that when you believe your problems are farther away, there's something liberating about it. That you're better able to look at them from a more gestalt perspective and to take a step back. So, I think the practical consequence of this is next time you're on vacation, don't just sit on the beach. Actually, this is an unpleasant way to spend a vacation. But next time your problems feel literally far away, it's when you should really be thinking about your problems. So next time you're on a beach, bring the executive report, bring all the bad news, and try to puzzle it out there. Your spouse may be a little bitter, but tell her you've got good evidence to back it up. So, there are all sorts of tweaks and I think clever little studies like that can show us how to do a slightly better job of thinking outside the box. But I think there really is no better way than simply taking a good walk and leaving your BlackBerry behind and thinking outside the box that way.
In a recent blog, you talked some about diversity in decision-making and the importance of having different perspectives trying to solve a problem. Could you talk a little bit about that research? And then we'll make some connections back to our sector. Sure.
I think one of the biggest and most potent decision-making flaws you see, and I think it's especially a big problem in terms of group decision-making and decision-making by consensus, is what scientists call the certainty trap, which is that people love to be right and they love to have consensus, and so this leads people very quickly to neglect dissenting and dissonant pieces of evidence. This is something, it's why liberals watch MSNBC and conservatives watch Fox. It feels nice to have your ideology reaffirmed. So this is a huge decision-making flaw. I think it's compounded by the fact, especially in groups, where groups want to reach that consensus, and so they quickly brush negative pieces of evidence aside. And so one of my favorite stories, in terms of the phenomenon, comes from Al Sloan, who ran GM for decades back when it was a successful car company. And they had some big important meeting whether or not to launch a new car company, and he looked around his board of directors and said, "Do we all agree?" And everyone said, yes, we agree. It's a great idea. And he said, "Okay, the meeting's adjourned. When we can come up with some reasons to disagree, we'll have this meeting again." In other words, he sought out disagreement, dissonant facts, simply because he knew that the certainty trap is a very, very big deal.
Mm-hmm. So what does that mean in terms of, well, it has many different implications, but in the functioning of cultural organizations, for example, does it suggest that homogeny is dangerous, but also that there need to be ways in which to bring in different perspectives, and that the richer the mix of people who are in the decision making, the better the decision is going to be, even if it may take longer to reach the decision? Or will it take longer?
Yeah, it certainly may take longer, but I think there's lots of compelling evidence from anecdotes I'm sure everyone in this room knows about, to well-done studies that show that in general, having a diverse set of backgrounds makes for a more productive conversation. I wrote an article last month about Kevin Dunbar. He's a scientist who studies the scientific process, and he told a great story about he'd spent 5 years following molecular biology labs in the Bay Area, and he describes one lab where they were all E. coli experts, the best E. coli experts in the world. They were all in this one lab, and they had a problem. It's a technical problem where one of the proteins they were trying to study was sticking to glass beads in this one little experimental assay they were doing. And so he describes this lab meeting where all these E. coli experts they're trying to sort through it, and so they use what's called a brute force approach, which took them about a month and a half to solve this problem. He describes another lab which had the exact same problem just down the hall where their proteins were sticking to these glass beads. This lab, though, wasn't just E. coli experts. This lab, there's a biophysicist there was a doctor just doing some research, there was a biochemist, a biophysicist. The full array of backgrounds in the biological sciences. They had the exact same problem, and because they had this diverse array, they solved the problem in 7.5 minutes. They quickly realized, and what he says when you look at the transcript of this meeting, which he has, is that the crucial component, the real benefit of having these diverse backgrounds was that it forced people to use metaphors to explain what they were thinking to someone else. So the biochemist had to invent metaphors on the fly to explain what he was thinking to the doctor, and the doctor had to use his own metaphors to explain it to the biophysicist. And that kind of the benefit of, I guess, mutual incomprehension, the fact that we all had to invent metaphors to explain it to someone else, is what triggered the insight and what led to the actual problem being solved. So that helps, I think, pin us down a little bit from just, the same wishy-washy advice of diversity in meetings is great, and says, well, diversity isn't enough. You you have to really encourage the conversation, encourage people to explain their particular take, their particular expertise in a new language that everyone can understand. That's when you can really leverage diversity in this productive setting.
That's an act of creativity in and of itself. That's
Yes.
really the point. So everybody's free. You create a whole new universe of possibility through that. To me, there's a dotted line between those observations and some writing you've done recently about charitable giving and what seem to be the triggers for giving or not, particularly and the relationship of all of that to sort of power and morality. And I wonder if you could make those connections for us.
Sure. The study I talked about briefly in terms of people giving money away and how that was not so different from them choosing candy bars. That I think does give us insight into the fact that that there are these underlying emotional mechanisms which allow us to assign value to things. And so I think, to the surprise of these scientists, when people were giving money to nonprofits, there wasn't some new exalted brain area that was just in charge of noble things that allowed them to differentiate between nonprofits. It was the same candy bar mechanism. It was simply, how meaningful is this to me? What does it mean to me? What's its value to me? I don't quite. It's hard to puzzle out the implications of that too much, because this is just one preliminary study. But I think it does suggest that people ultimately, our brain is practical, and that in the end you have to make the case for personal value. That I think, whenever possible, make it as concrete as possible. And that's why I think it's important, at least for me, in terms of understanding the importance of the arts and cultural institutions, to not just talk about lofty mechanisms, to not just about lofty benefits or benefits in the abstract, but for me, I think it's about why Proust can help you with your memory, why Virginia Woolf is important in terms of teaching you about thinking.
But isn't the study that you were discussing, doesn't it suggest that empathy and some ability to see the agency of others are actually triggers to generosity, if you will,
Yeah.
and that specificity trumps wild ambition, if you will. The more specific the project can be, the event can be,
Yeah.
the person can be, that is more appealing.
Yeah, so that was another smaller part of the study where they looked at how closely connected you felt to this nonprofit, and whether or not that meant you knew someone who was addicted to drugs, and so this was a nonprofit devoted to helping people recover from addictions. That trigger, there's another network apart from this candy bar mechanism, we'll call it, that measured how closely you felt to the actual people that were being helped by the nonprofit.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is going to be something that we'll talk about later on today, but I just wanted to root it in neuroscience. Jonah, your next book is about creativity, and I want you to tell us everything that you're going to write, so we have the inside scoop. But before this session, we were talking about some of the insights that you're collecting about individual creativity, group creativity, how cities or places become centers of great creative work. Could you just let us in on the secrets?
The book is I'm plying out right now is kind of a tour, everything from moments of insight, what happens in your brain at a very specific level, to Why are some cities more creative than others? Why are certain periods of time, from Elizabethan England to Paris of the 19-teens, why are they what sociologists call ages of excess genius, where there's just so much great work produced? What triggers that? So it asks lots of grandiose questions. I'm trying to think of some. I begin the book. I'm actually